Right, we've got our panel discussion now. So if you have Dave, Xavier, Philippe, and Daniel, that would be great. Thank you.
These, are they on? They're on. Great. Everybody, I think we can all sit down. We can all sit down and relax and be comfortable. So this is a panel discussion. There is a little bit of structure to it. So to begin with, we're going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, just give a bit of an overview regarding their careers. And then we've got a little bit of a structured session. So we've got 2 questions that we've asked everybody to prepare an answer to. And then hopefully you lot will have come up with some questions that you would like to challenge them on. So we're aiming to take about 45 minutes in total, like I say, to begin with, a bit of structure to it. Clearly, I'm just here as admin duty, so I've done my bit this morning, and I'm supporting Chris with the admin this afternoon. So all I've got to do is to keep everybody on time, and hopefully finish in about 45 minutes in total. So I'm happy to start over at the right-hand side. Do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Philippe. I go through the whole background of the start of my story because everybody always seems pretty intrigued by it. I'm from the US. I grew up near New York. I have a degree in chemistry from Rutgers University. After that, I worked for a pharmaceutical company for about 2 years. And then one day, I decided I will go move to Los Angeles to go become an actor. So it wasn't a one-day type of thing. I was taking acting classes in New York at the time. So I bought a one-way ticket to LA and I shipped my car over there, and I lived in LA for about 7 years. And I worked in the entertainment industry, produced some films, independent films. And yeah, I was also a bartender on the Sunset Strip. I was working as a substitute teacher in Hollywood for high school and middle school kids. I was also a bartender for catering companies, so I did that for a while, and I met a lot of Swedish people in Los Angeles. So somehow I ended up in Sweden because they kept telling me that there's 5 weeks of vacation and free healthcare and free university. And as an American, I was thinking to myself, oh, this can't even be true. And so, yeah, I ended up in Sweden. I did my master's in Sweden at Lund University in sustainability science, which is social studies. And then at that time, I was about 2014, I graduated for that. I was working in a clothing store for my work visa. And then I couldn't find a job in sustainability for like 5 years. So my one friend was telling me that I should learn data science because it seemed like this would fit my background. And I was like, okay. So I just started learning programming, started brushing up on math again. And I think that was about 2017 or 2018. So yeah, I started working as a data scientist in Stockholm. But at the previous time, I was living in Malmö, Sweden, which is near Copenhagen. But my first job was at a company called Fishbrain. It's a startup company. It's a social media app for people who go fishing. And then we were working on recommendations, and also they have a marketplace. So we're also working a little bit on computer vision because they have a lot of maps for this fishing app. And then I worked for a telecommunications company called Telia, and we're working with their recommendations for their media apps. So they had 3 media apps. So think of like the carousels when you're in like Netflix. So this type of thing, recommendations. Now I work for H&M. I work in their supply chain, and we work with, well, the team I work on is working with allocation. And yeah, I've been there for about 1.5 years. I am not an expert in optimization. I've actually never heard of it before I started working there. So I'm relatively new to optimization, but I have a lot of other skills that will probably contribute.
That's great. Javier, you've got a really difficult moment to follow such a varied career history. So over to you.
I was about to say just that I'm afraid my life is not as interesting. So I started studying math, and I really like it. Well, I'm here, I'm from Madrid, and I studied math in Madrid. I really liked it, so I continued studying math. I went to Germany, Bonn, and there I did my master's in more math, combinatorial optimization, and algebra. And after that, I continued studying math. I came back to Madrid and did a PhD in algebra, so not really related to optimization at all. But after my PhD, I did realize I didn't want to continue studying math. I had enough math pure math, at least for lifetime. So I tried to move into the industry. At that time, I didn't know there were jobs that paid you for doing optimization. So I started learning data science by myself and got myself a job as data scientist for a German consultancy company that were solving problems for the automotive industry. There was all this hype about autonomous cars and stuff like that, but I was basically doing statistics. Then I joined another consultative firm here in Madrid, Altran. It's now Capgemini, and that was really wild. Like I was working in all different industries and problems: optimization, data science, machine learning, neural networks, etc., etc. And yeah, I learned a lot, but I also had enough consultancy for a lifetime. And then I moved to Ryanair, where I am. Is the first time where I had the chance to work in a project in which the core of the solution was a mathematical optimization model. I really liked it. The project went well, and then in Ryanair we started doing a lot more of optimization projects, and that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years, more or less. And yeah, now I'm the team lead of the optimization team in Ryanair.
So we've got the eclectic mixed career, and then we've got the purist who's followed a mathematical approach, but didn't like being a consultant. And so we're going to hand over to the consultant.
I will say thank you, Javier, because I was afraid of speaking after Philippe and telling that my path towards using optimization and being here was not so interesting as his profile and his path. But so I'm a senior manager at LTP Labs, as David said. I work in consultancy. All my career has been in consultancy since I left the university. Actually, I started to work as a lean consultant. It was because my background, I hold a master in industrial engineering and management, and one of the natural courses of action was to start working in operations and changing processes and so on. And then I realized, because also in college I got in touch with mathematical optimization, that using data to solve problems was much more fun than only applying a process view on top of it. That's when I changed to LTP. Actually, I've been working there for the last 8 years, I would say that. It's been an interesting journey. We were 5 when I began there. Actually, we are 80 by now. It's been an interesting growth. It's been interesting to see and to start implementing the models, and then as time went by, started to managing projects, and now also helping in the commercial part of the team. So I would say, in terms of just to end up during this period, I also made an effort. It was kind of crazy. Now I have a newborn at home, so I'm also in a period in which I'm lacking sleep. But during this period, I made a PhD in which I started using optimization to solve a problem that I would say that most of you is familiar with, that is sales and operations planning. I made a PhD trying to find opportunities to use stochastic optimization, multi-objective optimization, and how can we merge these into topics such as sales and operations planning. But that's it. I hope this I think Philippe is still in the lead, but let's wait for the next question.
I don't know. We've got a real diverse mix. I think this will contribute to a great panel discussion. So for question 1, like I say, everybody's got a bit of a prepared answer for this one. We're going to try and limit it to kind of 3 minutes per person, but if everybody's ready. So question 1 that we put together was, as a data scientist, what types of challenges do you encounter with stakeholders when an optimization solution doesn't quite align to their original expectation? What are the typical hurdles that arise during the implementation phase? I don't know if we've got a volunteer to go first. Daniel, you
I
look,
can
you're
start
the
just to-
consultant.
Just to go
you
the
should
other way around.
Yeah, we'll go the
Yes.
opposite way. Daniel, you go first.
Yes, I can start. I think that's a very interesting question. When I was making and summarizing my thoughts regarding that, I think that there are two main challenges from my point of view and from my experience while trying to implement analytical models. One is related with how can we make decision makers to communicate with the models in an effective way. It's always a difficult task because typically decision makers do not know how to use optimization, but they need to feed some information to the model in order to have proper answers from optimization models. And I would say that in this axis, knowing how to deploy a proper and user-friendly interface in the models or coupled to the models is as important as developing the model in itself, because it is crucial that, for instance, and as we are in a operational excellence panel, let's imagine that we are making a production planning algorithm. It is important that the planner knows how to change the throughputs, how to change efficiency, how to change the priorities that they want to introduce into the model, and they do not know how to master Python and to go to Databricks and change the constraints. This is one of the pain points that I highlight the most, and this transition is important. Another one is related, in my view, with the mindset that also decision makers need to have to use an optimization model, especially if they came from an empirical oriented process, because when you do a plan or you optimize something using your experience, you can combine all the things in a single step, and the things stop to be that way when you start using an analytical model, because you need to start knowing how to perform what-if analysis, how to analyze the results, how to understand that the model in itself is not capable of grasping all the idiosyncrasies of the process. And then this is something that is also very difficult, I would say, and challenging. And knowing how to master this evolution is very important.
Cool, that's great. Javier, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so slightly related to what was just said, I think one of the main difficulties, and this is not only in optimization projects, right, but in general, when you deal with your customer or your business user, is to understand what they need. This is always difficult, and you never get it right at first. But especially in optimization projects, especially if you're modeling it with a MIP model or something that is going to, look for the real optimal solution, looking at all the search space, it is really likely that your first solutions are not correct just because you didn't understand the business rules, or because the business rules were not well defined enough. And since the solver is literally trying to squeeze those rules, you will end up with really sometimes extreme solutions. Like, I don't know, at the beginning, we were trying to plan training plans for the pilots and crew members in Ryanair. And this means that you needed to send them from many places in Europe, like everywhere where we have a base, to a training center that we only have for Dublin, Bergamo, East Midlands, where it doesn't matter. The thing is that in one of our first solutions, we suggested that a pilot from Corfu took a ferry to go to Bari and then take a plane to go to Dublin, which is a perfectly valid solution according to the business rules, because they didn't mention you cannot take ferries. But this was difficult. Like this made us look like fools. Like, what are you doing? You're just a nerd and you don't understand a thing. So yeah, I guess I learned the lesson that you need to be a bit careful on just delivering any solution that your solver delivered. But at the same time, it's difficult for you to judge whether it is fully sensical or not for the business user, because you don't yet have all the business understanding. So that's one thing that I think in optimization is, well, it's a bit more dangerous than in general. And the other thing is that many times when what you have experienced is that when you deliver your solution, sometimes the business users, instead of saying, no, I don't like this bit, or this slight bit is wrong, instead of that, they keep asking, could you give me more possibilities? Like, don't give me just one solution. Give me a few of them. And you don't understand why. And sometimes you need to understand, is this really a business need? Like it was in some presentations that we saw today. So you want to run the thing with different parameters, different configurations to have a global view of all the possible scenarios. But sometimes it's just that the user thinks that you cannot handle the complexity that he will to fix it manually. So we need to fight against the business, saying, no, I don't want to give you multiple solutions. I want to give you the optimal one. So tell me what you don't like. Tell me what is not working. And the minute you give them a solution, which is just fine, they will never ever ask for multiple solutions. So yeah, it's a bit of a fight with the customer sometimes to understand, are multiple solutions really necessary, or it is just that we still need to struggle to understand what are your needs.
That's great. Just don't give your customers too many options. It's got to be the best only. Yeah. And Philippe, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So I mean, so me coming into H&M, I was actually put on a product team with one of their most mature products, and so my case is a little bit different. I'd say is that I didn't come up with this solution. I didn't come up with this model. So for my customers that I have, they're all internal, they're a sales team. When something doesn't match with their expectation, I usually encounter this this kind of reaction of, it's this doesn't look right to us. And I'm like, okay. They're like, it must be the model maybe. And I'm like, it doesn't really work like that. I'm like, because this isn't a problem with the model, because we created this model. Like, you're like an artist. You create something based on the business requirements, and somebody before me created this, and this is basically, maximizing our objective function, and this is the best result that you're getting. So I try to tell them that if you have a new business requirement, then we need to adjust the model. But there was never anything inherently wrong with the model. So that communication has to be there. And if it wasn't there, then I outlined that we need it there. Or then I also outline what happened before this data got to the model. Because in the supply chain that I work with, it's probably the most complex thing I've ever seen. Honestly, I worked at a startup, I've worked at a mid-sized company, and H&M is a global company, one of the biggest retailers in the world. And every time I look at the supply chain diagrams, my mind is just like exploding, because I'm like, okay, this is a lot to take in. And I have to kind of ask, maybe there was something in a process before in our data, or something in a process that another team did before it got to this optimization that already addressed something that changed the behavior of what's going on, and the solution that you're getting. So those are the main challenges that I face. And my customers, I don't know, I feel weird calling them my customers. They're just another team. But they have a very different background from what I have. They have, it's like merchandising background, a business background, but it's not math specific. I think it would be a lot different if my customers that I was dealing with had math backgrounds, but I don't know if that's true, but that's just how I feel that it could be. But yeah, those are I'd say the biggest challenges that I face, that little bit of tension, but it comes with, you have to explain. And a little bit, you kind of got to become a salesperson. I mean, there's always going to be tension wherever you are between teams. So it's just about how to work together and manage expectations and be really clear on what this model is delivering and why. So yeah, that's how I kind of deal with it.
I do like the idea that everybody, as they start in a large organization, needs to go on a maths course or an operations research course about decision making. I think that would be ideal and solve a lot of problems. Just as a reminder before we move on to question 2. So we have got the section at the end where we really want the questions from you. You've now met the panelists. You've got a feel for their experience and the kind of viewpoint on a couple of themes. So do start thinking about those questions and get ready to challenge challenge some of the views we've already heard, or to ask for a particular piece of insight. So on our second question, we're going to stick with the stakeholder theme. So question number 2, we're going to start in the middle this time. Okay, Javier. So what examples have you seen where stakeholders believe that their business rules are sufficient, yet they are masking the true complexity of the business problem, leading to suboptimal overall business performance? And feel free to draw on some examples and experience that you've had.
Yeah. So again, related to that, there is a bit of a fight when you're understanding the business rules, right? So sometimes you need to challenge those rules, but you need to be careful. Otherwise, your customer gets mad at you because you're constantly challenge their rules. So an example is, so in Ryanair, we did the rostering with an optimization model that we have developed. And well, this means that you need to assign people to shifts or to operate flights. But then you also need to assign people to standby. So you need to have people that are ready just in case something happens and someone who was supposed to operate a flight cannot because he calls in sick or because his previous flight was delayed and hence he's not going to be there by the time he was supposed to be there, and someone needs to come and operate a flight on standby. And when we were developing this project, well, it is clear how many people you need to operate a flight, right? If we are thinking about pilots, well, you need 2. That's clear. Nothing to challenge there. But then when it comes to how many people you need to have on standby, then we realized that the only thing that mattered to them is how many airplanes, how many aircrafts you have in a given base. So you have 8 aircrafts. It doesn't matter if it is Barcelona, if it is Paris or whatever. You want to have the same number of people that are on standby that day. And that was a bit confusing to us, right? So they were happy with the solution because we were providing this, but it was confusing to us that you only care about the number of airplanes. Like they wouldn't care even if at some given day, yes, you have 8 aircrafts in there, but they are not flying. Like in winter, sometimes not all of your aircrafts are flying because there is not enough demand. So we suggested, shall we take into consideration the number of flights that you need to operate? And they were like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? And well, they didn't have an answer. And we were lucky that as long as the solution is working for them, and they are happy. So the reason that they were doing this is basically because it's a simplification for their job, right? So they need to roster those things, not for just one base, but for many. And just looking at the number of aircrafts, which is something very easy and very constant every day, is the same. So you can have in your mind, okay, I have 4 aircrafts here. I need to have 8 people in standby, and that's it. It's very simple, easy. You don't need to think about looking at the specific schedule in one day. And this is one place in which we managed to change, let's say, how the business is making those decisions. We can expand on that and maybe try to even go farther, like, okay, there's the number of flights, but also maybe we can understand in which bases and which flights are more likely to get delayed. Because if you have a base with a lot of delays, then you probably need to have more people on standby to cover for potential issues. But if you have bases that work very, very well, then maybe you don't need as many because, well, that's one of the main reasons why you need people on standby. So, and you can continue expanding on the complexity of the decisions that you want to make, let's say, I know it's fully wrong, but more optimal decisions, not because they are more optimal, but just because the business requirements changed and you have more freedom to make decisions.
That's great, thank you. Daniel's been quiet for a while, so should we go this end first?
Yes, I can. I think that when we discuss and we think about this topic of business rules, it is very difficult, from my experience, to find projects in which this does not happen, because the typical path is that you start the project, you define the requirements, you design some mock-ups, you implement a first proof of concept, you start validating the result, and then the first feedback that you receive is that there is some specific rule that was not considered and that the solution is not valid anymore. So I think that actually this is something that needs to be considered in our case. And when doing consultancy projects, I think that one specific pain point, and David, I think that you may suffer the same from your experience, is that you have a project chart, you have a plan that you need to follow, and then you start a phase in which you start being inefficient because you are always trying to bring decision makers and the people that are validating the model to this trade-off between how to have a model that is general enough and at the same time that represents the details of the business. Just to give you, for instance, I can give you one or two examples. One that I think that is very interesting. It was a project that was in which I was involved. It was with a consumer goods company, and the goal, I think the project was very interesting, and we have two teams. But the goal of the project was to make what we call the zero-based budgeting. Imagine that you are planning next year budget. The traditional approach is that you look to past year figures and somehow make a trend line regarding the costs and profits that you are going to have. We tried to use optimization to bring a different perspective, and we tried to start by the sales plan, try to anticipate demand, and then optimize resources in order to make a zero-based budget that can, of course, reach the best profit, that can maximize profit for the company. And as I said, we have two different teams in which we managed to control to somehow sustain the scope that was with production team, and the team is using it. And there was a second team, the logistics team, that was also involved in this project, but in that case, we had a very difficult time when we start validating the solutions because, for instance, when you imagine a logistics activity and you are setting up and designing the operations of a warehouse, you need to somehow identify how many equipments you need, what are the flows of goods in each one of the logistics stages, and we start validating the solutions, and then a lot of business rules start to limit the quality of the model. We started linking the products with specific specific equipments, and that somehow limited the quality of the results. This is just one example. I could name a few more, but just a general advice on this type of challenges and how to consider the business rules. I think that a good trade-off that can be made is to look to decision makers and try to make them understand the complexity of changing the model. And in order to do that, I would say that a good strategy would be to generate the solutions in which we have a model that does not have a specific business rule, and we use it to discuss with the decision maker, and then we can at least try to generate a second solution in which we try to mimic this second business rule. And when analyzing both with decision makers, try to make them see that we can start implementing some constraints that are not beneficial in terms of the output that I can get from a model.
That's great. Yeah, I love the idea of benchmarking it against the business rules just to prove them correct or incorrect, most likely incorrect. And Philippe, what's your opinion on business rules that are mandated by your customers?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to business rules, I had a different example before I came up here, but now I switched it like last second because I just thought of it now. But I think a lot of it comes down to trust between your client, your customers, and that trust really plays a role, I think, in whether they're going to listen to your solution. And I was thinking about this example. We have this business rule. So the use case that I work on is allocation. So for H&M, our team helps decide which articles should go to which stores. And we have this one business rule that says certain pairs of clothing should go to stores together. So it's a pretty hard business rule. Like, I don't mean hard as in like hard to do it, but I mean, it's just like they should go together. Really simple. So my customer that I deal with in meetings on a scheduled basis, they're not the actual ones who make the final decision on the recommendations we give them. It's actually one step away. And every now and then I get an email and says, you have an infeasibility. And I say, okay, why? And I look, and it's because the people who took our recommendations, they thought that this is not the best, their business rule wasn't being followed. They said, okay, I have this pair of items, but it's not going where I want it to go. So what they do is they end up sending it to way more stores than the recommendation sent to. But the thing is that they don't realize that there's many other business rules that they didn't consider, like physical constraints. They didn't account for the supply. They didn't account for how many stores it's going to. They just said, oh, but this is a really hot item. It should go to all the stores. And then it just doesn't work. But the thing is that I think that if there's trust and that trust is there, then maybe they wouldn't deviate from the recommendations, because that is a hard business rule, or like a strict business rule that they gave to us. And every time we give them a solution, that business rule is already baked into the solution. And when they deviate from that recommendation on that pair of articles, I know there's a lack of trust in the recommendation. So I think that, and what they're trying to do is it doesn't even work. It's infeasible because there's not enough supply. So it's just, don't do it. But see, that's where it breaks down, because it's not even a suboptimal solution what we're talking about. Because before we were talking about suboptimal solutions. Now I'm just saying it fails. But if they trust the whole solution, it would never happen in the first place.
Yeah, I think that trust point is really intriguing. It builds on what you were saying as well, like how can you build trust? Well, if you show them what the outcome would be if they don't go with the optimized solution, you're building trust that the math is going to outperform. So that's great, yeah. So this is everybody else's opportunity now. I think we've got, Chris, have we got 15 minutes left? So we've got about 15 minutes left. Who would like to go first with the questions? And stony silence from the audience. Oh, look, we have one. Here we go.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you so much. I have a question about the last situation. It might be, if they separate the articles for the business rules, that in the end, the results could be better. Do you anything to find out what the results will be? And also discuss that with the people who change the items and the orders?
You mean for the paired articles I was talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably more context would help out with this one. So maybe think about like a swimsuit, like a women's top, women's bottom. Usually those are ones you want to keep together, because if you're a customer shopping for, this swimming piece, and you only have access to the top, it's not a good user experience if the bottom's not available. So yeah, so that's kind of where that played out for that case. Does that help answer that question with more context?
Yeah, it does. I can also imagine that some other two articles might fit together, but you couldn't sell them separately as well.
Yeah,
then it could be interesting to discuss to find out what the results would be, and if you could optimize.
Yeah, so this has been done already. So basically, before there were business rules that decided what clothing garments should go to which store, and this goes down to assortment. The assortment is a customer going to store and what's available for them. And before, what would happen is you would have these pieces that they're not a matching set, but they go together. Like, for example, if I'm on stage right now, it would be a bit odd if I wore like shoes for a suit and a tank top. That wouldn't make sense at all, right? But if I wore maybe this outfit I'm wearing, it makes a little more sense. So the assortment that you have available in the store for a customer is really important, and you kind of want to have a right mix. So before, in their business rule way, they're this like kind of business rule, old logic way, they would have an assortment available for the customer of many times having like pieces of clothes don't match well with other pieces. But then after this optimization product was created, the assortment just fit better for the customer. So they were able to, for example, match maybe a fleece hoodie with maybe another fleece pair of pants that previously wouldn't even have been available. It could be a different color, it could be a different model, but they go together. So yeah, so that's been tested before. It was before I came on, but yeah, that type of stuff is it's been done.
Okay, so feel free to ask questions that are completely left field. So we have one over here. You have to press and hold, I think,
Yeah.
to make the mic.
Thank you all for the discussion. Actually, I have two questions. One regarding the business rules leads me to one of the most important topics in optimization, that is the problem framing. So when we are starting the optimization project, we should be able to understand which are the main constraints, what we want to optimize. In some cases, our business assessment is good to get all those constraints, but there are some constraints that come from those business rules that we cannot map in the beginning. And what I would like to ask is usually which your suggestion for the best problem framing in the beginning and correct mapping of all the constraints that we might end up having in the end of the project, because some constraints from my experience only show up when the client understands the impact that it has on the solution. Then they remember, oh, we have this problem that we need to consider, and then it's an iterative process, but we want to short that time as much as possible. That's one of the questions. And the second one that I have, and I think it's a problem not only related with optimization, but with data science, mainly with machine learning, is explainability of decisions. And I would like to understand, because when we look to a problem from a local point of view, some decisions, if in the other way around, could be minimize costs, for instance, but not in a global point of view. And for the customers, that might not be easy to understand. I would also like to know your opinion about this topic.
Okay, so those two good questions there. I think, can we take the explainability one first? I think that's a really interesting and challenging problem. So any volunteers to go first? Javier's going for it.
I can go. I would say that actually I don't have an answer for that. So I'm not really sure there's a solution for that. So I guess a good thing is to only implement the constraints that you really understand and that you really believe, okay, this is a really hard constraint. So those are the ones that should go first. And then just try to iterate as fast as possible with the customer. So you start from very simple constraints, very obvious ones. Just make sure that, okay, yeah, that there will be issues, but at least those constraints are fine, and then iterate fast. And something which is pretty popular right now, fail fast. It's not failing, right? It's just advancing in the project. In my experience, it's not good to try to aim at less iterations. It's just to make sure that the iterations are fruitful. Yeah, that's my experience. I don't know about the others.
Can I
Yeah,
complement? I think the topic of the explainability can have at least a technical perspective and a business-oriented perspective. I will say that the technical perspective will be to analyze my constraints, look to the slacks that I have in my constraints, understand which constraints are limiting the solution that I'm getting. That is obviously something that can be done, understanding and looking to the shadow prices and evaluating the impact of increasing one unit in the capacity associated to each one of the constraints. I would say that from a practical standpoint, that is not so easy to be made. I agree with Javier that there is not a single solution. I would say that trying at least, especially in the validation phase of the first solutions that are being generated from the model, I would say that a good practice would be to validate the model against a real world plan that was developed with the previous method and injecting the same inputs, trying to get the same output. That would be the first, I would say, practice in order to validate an optimization model. And then afterwards, after I can reach a good level of validation, I can start including constraints in iterations and validate whether the solution changes a lot or not. I would say that we could do something as this. But again, I think it's difficult, especially when the problem is very complex and there are many variables and many constraints to have an accurate answer.
And Philippe, would you like to comment on explainability?
Yeah, I also have the same opinion. I don't really have an answer for explainability. In machine learning, I can give you an answer, but when it comes to this, it's a challenge. I always have something explainable when it's infeasible. Then I can explain something and say these constraints conflict. This is why. Or my other responses to why something happens is I say that's our objective function, because literally that's what it's trying to do, either minimize or maximize. And I say that for whatever reason, this is what it decided based on our inputs. But after that, I can't really get into too much detail after that. I think it would be really fun to maybe experiment with an objective function and say, okay, if I say it's an objective function, then I'm going to prove it. I'm going to change the objective function and maybe see a different solution and do some comparison. I've never done that, actually. I just kind of thought that off the top of my head, but I think that's how it would be an interesting thing to try. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. So
Okay, that's great.
Maybe just to add about the explainability. So I don't think that there's an easy answer. Like if your goal is to explain why the model made a decision, this is, as Daniel said, it could be very time consuming. And most of the times I would say it doesn't add much value. But if the problem is that your customer is asking why the model did this, then you can ask back, right? Why would you have done? Why do you think this is a wrong solution? Give me an alternative. Sometimes they won't just put the effort to do that, and sometimes they will, and then you can just input this into your model and explain them immediately. Okay, this is infeasible because of this, or the objective function is worse, and that saves you a lot of time, let's say.
yeah, can I add on top of that real quick?
Yeah.
So I just thought about this. I had this situation about 3 weeks ago. So we had one article, which is like a shirt or something, and it went to a store, and this team, they didn't like that. They said, why did that one article go to that store? And I also asked, I'm like, did it really matter? I'm like seriously, it's the one store. What's the problem? Okay, granted, they don't think it's ideal, but honestly, they didn't really have a good answer back. There wasn't really much of an answer on why it mattered. So sometimes I feel like customers are just out to kind of nitpick at every little thing sometimes, I feel like, but I don't know if that's always the case. Have you guys had that experience before?
No, yeah, definitely like the same you said, but I would say that sometimes these questions about explainability are just, like there is another root cause for that. There is some mistrust from the user, and then they want you to explain things. Sometimes, they want to prove that you're not as smart as them. So it really depends on your customer, right? Some of them are just happy with the solutions and they trust that they are perfect. So in my experience, most of those explainability questions are more related to the stakeholders' relationship to the project.
I think it's a really interesting point, isn't it? We call it optimization, and by branding and marketing, then our customers hold us accountable for it to be fully 100% mathematically optimal and fully explainable. Whereas if you were to ask me as an individual to decide what I'm going to send to each store and I got it wrong, I wouldn't be held to the same level of accountability. So there's a kind of maybe a branding issue that we've got around the way that we name our science. But okay, so there was a first part to that question. I'll try and paraphrase it, so correct me if I get it wrong, but it was when we're building from business rules through to a constraint set, so when we're moving to an optimal approach, what strategies do you find work well in order to build that first set of constraints? Is it try and get everything in, or is it move on an iterative cycle of building up those constraints over time? Does that kind of paraphrase where we got to? Yeah, perfect. Who wants to go first?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that because I'm
Were
working
you
with
going
emerging
first because you started the answer? So there you go.
Ah,
I already say that, right? Just try to find let's say the minimal set of constraints that make sense for you, and then also can deliver a meaningful solution. Like, yeah, don't allow people to take ferries, things like that. But
I would say that I tried different strategies in order to overcome that challenge. I already implemented models in which I only spent 2 or 3 hours defining the requirements and develop the model as fast as I can, so we can start validating, and then worked on an agile mindset to improve the model. And it was a mess because I did not spend enough time in the initial phase. I already tried the opposite direction, and it was a mess in the sense that we designed an optimal requirements document, but the problems appeared nevertheless. I would say that a sweet spot exists between both strategies. From my belief, I would say that we need to be fast developing the first proof of concept, and then we need to complement and to improve it over time.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Can I do a if I was to make my own?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So if I was to, I would think, like you said, you need to know the business case. And I think you really have to have a really good understanding of the goal. And then I think from there, you can come up with some objective function, and you don't have to really be too stuck on your objective function. And then from there, you should just figure out simple business rules and just using those as your constraints. I think, we're talking about like failing fast, iterating. I think these are the most important things to do, because even if you don't land the best objective function, or the constraints are maybe not the way they're supposed to be, it doesn't matter, because if you're failing fast and you're getting results, you should start to be able to see this, and you should still be able to start tweaking what you're doing. And you should also be able to kill your darling. You should be able to just throw stuff away if it's not working and just come up with new stuff. So that's, maybe not in optimization I've done this, but I've done this in plenty of machine learning projects where there's the business case and I have to understand it really well and I have to go do something, but I want to keep iterating as fast as possible.
Plenty of iteration there is the answer.
I
Okay,
would-
we're pretty, you got an
sorry.
answer?
Yeah, it just made me think. I would also add, based on what Daniel said, that maybe you need to be careful about the complexity of the problem you're looking at. So if you're looking at a very, very complex optimization in terms of business rules and the size of your problem and stuff, then maybe you need to reconsider this thing of failing fast, because you cannot make simple decisions at the beginning, because then you will pay them hard later on. So yeah, I guess there is this exception. Okay, just make sure that if your problem is really complex, then maybe you need to spend a little bit more for your first fail, just in case.
I think that's amazing. I can see Chris shifting uncomfortable in his seat as we're a couple of minutes over. But have we got time for one more? As long as we limit it to 30 seconds for an answer. So a gentleman here in the front.
So, in your opinion, what are the most exciting innovations, recent innovations that will help you to make your optimization projects better, or would ease your jobs as optimization practitioners? If you would like to comment.
The answer is easy. This one, Gurobi 11.0, right?
Maybe not.
He's after a discount. That's what it is.
I would just complement 10 seconds, just as on top of this version that promises that the non-linearities of the model are typically a problem, and we spend a lot of time trying to linearize. If Gurobi 11.0 delivers this capability, I think that would be incredible to overcome the first phase of designing the model. Huge expectations against the 11.0 version.
Maybe I could rephrase my question a little bit. Like, are you trying to utilize the innovations in machine learning domain in your optimization projects to get benefits from developments in that domain somehow?
Are you wanting one of them to answer with the words ChatGPT at some point? Okay, so innovations in ML. What are the innovations in ML that can be applied to optimization? And you've only literally got 30 seconds now because Chris is about to kill us.
So from my side, we have thought sometimes about applying it on reinforcement learning when you're handling a problem that has a lot of heuristics or meta-heuristic, but this is just an idea. We've never spent the time to do that. It's too innovative maybe, but...
Yeah, for our side, we use demand forecasting as input in our optimization. Just getting our demand forecast better. So it's not necessarily about the newest stuff out there, but it could be. For example, if you're doing forecasting, time series, or whatever. I mean, the newest stuff is like Tide, I guess, that created by Google, but just keeping up with what's out there and trying it. But it doesn't have to be the most advanced thing that works best. So keeping up with everything, I guess, and try it.
10 seconds. I would say that ChatGPT and NLP techniques, just to do not forget this topic, can be interesting to help optimization discover new inputs that otherwise could not be very easy to structure. The capability of using textual information and get information from unstructured sources can be leveraged with these techniques and then can feed the optimization model. I think there is a promising avenue there.
And we did get the ChatGPT answer, so thanks for that. And the consultant had to. We are out of time. I would just like to say a massive thanks to our panelists. I think they've been amazing. I think it's been a really good session. And thanks to everybody here as well for contributing their questions and ideas. So yeah, really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.